Welcome back to the Voice Vista, where we cut through the headlines to tell you the human story behind world politics. Today, we're asking a big question. Where does India really stand in the global power game?
Because here's the thing, India wants to be a global heavyweight. But is it punching above its weight?
Let's start with the numbers. India's economy is about $4 trillion, the world's fifth largest. Big, right?
Huge! But then you compare it, China sits at $18 trillion, the US at $30 trillion. Suddenly, India looks like a middleweight in a heavyweight ring.
And on defense, India is the world's second largest arms importer, meaning it buys more weapons than almost anyone, but doesn't yet produce enough of its own.
That's critical, because while India has been pushing self-reliance, its high-end tech still comes mostly from outside. That dependency limits what it can do strategically.
Which explains why Prime Minister Modi is carefully reopening dialogue with China, even after the deadly Galwan clashes in 2020 that froze ties.
And let's be honest, those clashes were brutal. Soldiers on both sides killed in hand-to-hand combat in the Himalayas. No bullets, just stones, sticks, and raw violence.
Yet 4 years later, Delhi is back at the table. Why? Look at the numbers. India's trade deficit with China is $99 billion. That's larger than its entire defense budget for 2025. That economic gap speaks louder than weapons.
And Beijing knows it. Recently, China's envoy in Delhi called the U.S. a bully over tariffs on Indian goods. And Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he urged India to see China as a partner, not a threat.
It's a remarkable shift in tone, but many Indians are asking, why now? Why talk to Beijing when trust is at rock bottom?
Strategic affairs scholar Happyman Jacob gives a blunt answer. What's the alternative? For decades, he argues, managing China will be India's central challenge. You can't ignore your biggest neighbor.
But this isn't just about India and China. Add a third player, Russia. Delhi, Beijing, and Moscow have been quietly talking trilaterally.
And that's fascinating, because Russia today is weakened by the Ukraine war and increasingly seen as China's junior partner. Yet for India, Russia still matters.
Energy security is one reason. Discounted Russian oil has become India's lifeline. Foreign Minister Jaishankar's recent visit to Moscow signaled that relationship isn't going anywhere, sanctions or not.
But it's also political signaling. By staying close to Russia, India reminds Washington that it's not locked into the U.S. camp. That's leverage.
And it's needed because U.S.-India ties under Trump, they're complicated.
Very. Trump has repeatedly claimed he could broker peace between India and Pakistan, something Delhi sees as meddling in its core sovereignty issue.
Add to that, a much-hyped trade deal with Washington has stalled, reportedly because the U.S. wants more access to India's farm markets.
And Trump scolding India for buying cheap Russian oil? Infuriating, especially since China is buying far more without the same backlash.
Still, India has seen worse. Remember 1974? After India's first nuclear test, the U.S. slapped sanctions. Then again in 1998, after more nuclear tests. India was isolated.
And yet, less than a decade later, Washington and Delhi signed a landmark civilian nuclear deal. Proof that even bitter fights can give way to cooperation when the strategic logic demands it.
So here's the heart of the debate. Should India align more closely with the U.S. to balance China?
Ashley Tellis says yes. He argues India's hedging undermines its security. In his words, the U.S., even in decline, will tower over both Asian giants, so India should cement a privileged partnership with Washington.
But not everyone agrees. Niruppama Rao, former Indian ambassador to both Beijing and Washington, calls India a titan in chrysalis. Her point is India is too big, too ambitious to tie itself down to one superpower.
She frames it as autonomy, not weakness, a flexible India moving between camps, buying time as the world shifts.
Still, India is uneasy about one thing. a China-led, Russia-backed, non-American world order. That vision makes Indian policymakers deeply uncomfortable.
And they're realistic. As Sumit Ganguly of Stanford puts it, there's no prospect of rapprochement with China. The rivalry will endure. Russia? Useful, but only to a point. The U.S.? Messy under Trump, but essential.
So India's strategy becomes clear. Absorb the blows, ride the storms, and keep options open.
It's almost like geopolitical Aikido, redirecting the pressure rather than confronting it head-on.
That's a great metaphor because India's real leverage isn't size, not yet. It's patience.
Time is India's biggest weapon. If it can survive the storms, China's rise, Russia's decline, the U.S.'s unpredictability, it can grow into the power it wants to be.
The stakes couldn't be higher. 1 billion people, a restless young workforce, a democracy under strain, a military still modernizing. India has to hold its nerve.
Because at the end of the day, survival is strategy.
And maybe that's the quiet wisdom of Delhi's diplomacy. Wait, watch, endure, and emerge stronger.
The question, of course, is whether patience will be enough in a world moving faster and breaking harder than ever before.
And that's where we'll leave you tonight.
You've been listening to the Voice Vista. If you found this conversation valuable, hit follow and share it with a friend.
Because the world may be complex, but it always has a human story.